Hi, this is Donna, West Houston, Texas Realtor, and I, a while back, had my own experiment. So we were talking about how the buyer's agents, they weren't sure if they were trying to make the buyer pay for it or the seller was still going to pay for it or what the deal is. Everything's always been whatever you want it to be, but generally you, what they say, you attract more bees with honey. And I did an experiment where I called and contacted 10 listings, just random listings, and asked the seller's agent what they were paying the buyer's agent. So out of the 10 that I did, 8 were paying an acceptable amount or rate that a buyer's agent most likely would be okay with. And the 20% or other 2 were not saying they weren't paying the agent, but were saying that they would pay them something and it would be negotiable, which in my terms, I would feel like that's really not saying anything. That's kind of like saying, hey, make me an offer and we'll see. The thing is sellers agents will say that with a caveat. Well, it depends on how much they offer. And to me, that's not cool. Like, it should be separate from the offer. So I think that, you know, those people, it's negotiable, but you're really negotiating the purchase of a house solely on how much that seller is going to pay the buyer's agent. So in a way, the law really kind of screwed things up. Like all these lawsuits about like, we don't want to pay the buyer's agent turned into everything that they didn't want it to be. Because, you know, if you're negotiating based on the buyer's agent getting paid or not, you're thinking 2 things. Well, I don't want to buy that house, or I don't need a buyer's agent to buy that house. I will tell you right now, when you deal with people who are not upfront, there's going to be problems. So if you don't have a buyer's agent representing you on your behalf, things can get ugly. They take a long time. And at the same time, they want more for their house than if they would have paid for the buyer's agent. I know it doesn't make sense, but it happens. And that's exactly how it works a lot of the time. So please get a buyer's agent. Please, please, please. Unless you're a realtor or or have had recent real estate experience, or are a real estate lawyer, or are a lawyer in that state that you're buying in. Because remember, every state has different rules. And even if you're a realtor, you may not know the rules. If it's been 10, 20 years, or even 5 years ago that you were a realtor, things are constantly changing. Rules and laws are constantly changing. So it is so imperative to get a buyer's agent who's licensed in that state and geographically competent in the area that you are purchasing in. But otherwise, the majority, 80%, are paying the buyer's agent. And 20% are wishy-washy, which People who are wishy-washy, that's going to be a complicated deal. That seller's going to be wishy-washy. There's so many red flags that we go through that we go, that's a red flag, that's a red flag, that's a red flag. And it leads to a mess. And then 6 months later, you're like, yeah, we're going to close on that house soon. When it's been 6 months, it shouldn't take that long. Or we haven't even done a contract, but we're still talking. So anyways, I am venting, but this is a fact, from seeing other people's, watching other people make those mistakes and knowing that, despite that rule, it doesn't matter, buyer's agent is important. If houses aren't selling, there's usually not enough buyers per the area, and or depending on the economic situation and the political climate, people may just not be buying right now, or everybody's just wanting too much for their house. And that can be a big problem. Like sometimes you get people who want $100,000 more than what their house is marketable for. And they'll put it on the market for that and wonder why it doesn't sell. And then they blame the realtor. Well, you're not selling my house for the amount that I want. When the reality is the amount the house is going to sell for is what the buyers will pay for. And it's not that, it's that in an economic situation where everybody thinks their house is worth more and you get a lot of people wanting more, not like 100,000, but maybe like 50,000 or 30,000 or 20,000 more. It's a huge difference. It's all about just, that's why it's an asking price, and you make an offer and you kind of negotiate to a happy medium for what you think it's worth, what you're willing to pay for it, and what they're willing to sell it for. And you come to that happy medium. A lot of sellers get emotionally involved in their house worth because a lot of it is memories and what they put into it and the effort and the time, and so there's a lot of emotions going on. Just know that at the end of the day, sometimes it just takes time for sellers to emotionally let go of that house and lower the price over months. So if you think, oh, that house has been on the house has been on the market for 6 months, something's wrong with that house. A lot of times there's nothing wrong with that house. It's just maybe the house is priced a little bit too high, and the seller hasn't emotionally gotten to that point where he's ready to let it go for the price that a buyer is willing to buy it for. It's as simple as that. So have faith in, getting the house that you want. Do not hesitate in making an offer that is lower than the asking price if you think it's too high. Work with your buyer's agent. They will also help you find market ranges to look at, and you look at the house according to the market ranges and the area, and you kind of come to a conclusion, well, they want this, but really according to what's sold in the past 3 to 6 months, or the condition of the house and, the area, I really think it's worth this much. And I want to offer this much, but I'm afraid to make this offer. It's okay to make that offer. And you can even state the reasons. If they ask, well, why did they make this offer? And you can tell your realtor to tell them, well, my client made this offer based on these reasonings. Windows are all old, it's backed up to a highway, or the house needs all kinds of work. Here's a list of all the things that need to be done. You can do that. You could have the reasons why. This is why I believe it's worth this and not this amount. And if you really like and want that house and the seller really wants to sell it, then you guys are going to negotiate to a happy place to get that house in contract and closed within a reasonable amount of time. Like 45 days is kind of the reasonable amount of time. Sometimes it's a little more, sometimes it's a little less. So just me blabbing around real estate. Maybe you're interested in this info, maybe you're not, but please listen to this info if you are considering buying a house, and take what you want and can out of it so that you can get where you want to be in the future.